Every avoidant has an internal biological clock. Their moods, feelings, emotions, even their arousal is completely governed by this internal clock. This secret clock functions through complex psychological mechanisms that balance their need for autonomy with their fear of permanent loss, creating windows of vulnerability where they become most receptive to reconnection attempts. The person who figures out and masters this clock holds incredible power over the avoidant and becomes almost completely immune to their cheap circus tricks. Before we start, I want to give you a disclaimer that this video is not recommending that you become a detective and try to monitor every single move of the avoidant. That is a guaranteed way to end up miserable and paranoid. What I want you to do is take the information and use it in the best way to support the well-being of your relationship and, more importantly, your own well-being. With that being said, let us start this scientific breakdown of the avoidance internal clock. The X architecture of avoidant timing. Avoidant timing operates through sophisticated psychological mechanisms that balance their competing needs for emotional connection and autonomy protection. This internal clock functions like a complex algorithm that processes multiple variables, including their emotional state, external circumstances, perceived relationship threat levels, and their assessment of partner attachment status to determine optimal contact timing. Their timing architecture begins with separation anxiety processing, where initial relief from relationship pressure gradually gives way to awareness of genuine loss and emotional emptiness. This processing occurs in predictable phases that can be mapped and anticipated based on their attachment severity and relationship investment level. The avoidance internal clock includes threat assessment calculations, where they continuously evaluate whether reaching out represents acceptable vulnerability risk or dangerous emotional exposure that might reactivate their defensive systems. This risk analysis determines whether they interpret contact attempts as safe reconnection or threatening pursuit. Their timing mechanisms extend to ego protection strategies, where they monitor their self-image and social standing to ensure contact attempts don't appear desperate or needy, which would contradict their identity as emotionally independent individuals who don't require validation or connection from others. The psychological architecture also involves partner status evaluation, where they assess whether their former partner has moved on, developed new relationships, or maintained availability that affects their confidence in successful reconnection and their willingness to risk rejection through contact attempts. Their internal clock includes emotional regulation cycles, where periods of numbness and detachment alternate with waves of longing and attachment activation, creating optimal contact windows when their emotional availability peaks while their defensive systems remain manageable. The initial separation response pattern, the avoidance response to relationship ending or no contact implementation, follows predictable patterns that create the foundation for their internal timing clock. Understanding these initial responses reveals when their psychological state becomes most conducive to successful contact and reconnection attempts. Their initial response begins with relief and validation, where the absence of relationship pressure confirms their belief that independence provides emotional safety, and relationship obligations create unnecessary stress and anxiety. This relief period typically lasts several days to weeks, depending on relationship intensity. The separation pattern includes activity increase, where they fill their time with work, hobbies, social activities, or other relationships that distract from any immediate emotional impact of the separation while reinforcing their sense of autonomy and self-sufficiency. Their initial response extends to rationalization development, where they create logical explanations for the relationship ending that minimize their responsibility while preserving their self-image as reasonable individuals who made appropriate decisions about incompatible partnerships. The pattern also involves emotional numbing activation, where their psychological defense systems suppress feelings of loss, longing, or regret that might threaten their emotional equilibrium or challenge their decision to maintain distance and separation. Their separation response includes social presentation management, where they demonstrate to friends, family, and colleagues that they are thriving independently, which serves both to convince others and themselves that the separation was beneficial and appropriate. The anxiety emergence timeline. After the initial relief period, avoidants begin experiencing subtle anxiety and discomfort that gradually intensifies as their nervous system processes the reality of potential permanent loss. This anxiety emergence follows predictable timelines that create optimal contact windows when their attachment system activation peaks. The anxiety timeline begins with subtle unease emergence, typically occurring 2 to 4 weeks after separation, where vague feelings of emptiness, restlessness, or dissatisfaction begin penetrating their emotional numbing without clear connection to relationship loss or partner absence. Their anxiety development includes sleep and appetite disruption patterns, where stress hormones create physical symptoms that make their emotional state undeniable while interfering with their ability to maintain normal life routines and emotional regulation strategies. The emergence process extends to memory intrusion, where positive relationship experiences begin surfacing with emotional intensity, despite their attempts to suppress or minimize these recollections through distraction and rationalization strategies. Their anxiety timeline also involves social comparison activation, where they begin noticing other couples, relationship content, or romantic opportunities that trigger awareness of their single status and potential relationship loss rather than relationship freedom. The emergence pattern includes future projection anxiety, where they begin imagining long-term scenarios without their partner and recognizing the genuine loss this represents in terms of companionship, emotional support, and life satisfaction. The peak vulnerability window. Between 6 to 12 weeks after separation, most avoidants reach peak vulnerability where their anxiety about permanent loss reaches maximum intensity while their defensive systems remain manageable. This window represents optimal timing for contact attempts that maximize reconnection potential while minimizing defensive activation. The peak vulnerability begins with defensive system fatigue, where maintaining emotional numbness and separation rationalization becomes psychologically exhausting, creating cracks in their protective armor that allow authentic feelings to emerge with greater intensity. Their vulnerability window includes identity crisis development, where their sense of self as an independent, emotionally self-sufficient individual becomes challenged by mounting evidence of their emotional dependency and attachment needs that separation has revealed. The peak period extends to social isolation recognition, where they realize their defensive strategies have created loneliness and disconnection that extends beyond their romantic relationship into their broader social and emotional life. Their vulnerability window also involves regret development, where they begin recognizing missed opportunities for deeper connection, intimacy, and relationship satisfaction that their defensive strategies prevented them from experiencing or appreciating. The peak vulnerability includes future anxiety, where they project their current emotional state forward and recognize that their defensive patterns might prevent them from ever achieving the connection and intimacy they unconsciously crave. The contact timing calculation system. Avoidants use sophisticated internal calculations to determine when reaching out represents acceptable risk versus dangerous vulnerability. Understanding these calculations reveals optimal moments when external contact attempts align with their internal readiness for reconnection rather than triggering defensive responses. Their calculation system begins with pride versus longing assessment, where they weigh their ego protection needs against their genuine desire for reconnection. Contact becomes possible when longing intensity exceeds pride. Protection requirements. The timing calculations include rejection risk evaluation, where they assess the probability of positive response versus potential humiliation or ego damage from contact attempts. Their confidence in favorable reception determines their willingness to initiate communication. Their system extends to control maintenance assessment, where they evaluate whether contact attempts preserve their sense of agency and choice versus creating appearance of desperation or emotional dependency that contradicts their self-image. The calculation process also involves opportunity cost analysis, where they consider what they might lose through continued separation versus what they risk through contact attempts, creating complex psychological equations that determine optimal timing. Their timing system includes social context evaluation, where they consider external circumstances, mutual social connections, and environmental factors that might affect contact reception and their ability to maintain dignity through reconnection attempts. The seasonal and circumstantial triggers. Certain seasonal periods, life events, and circumstantial factors create predictable triggers that accelerate avoidant contact timing by intensifying their attachment anxiety or reducing their defensive capabilities. Understanding these triggers reveals strategic opportunities for maximizing contact effectiveness. Seasonal triggers include holidays, anniversaries, and significant dates that activate memory associations and relationship nostalgia while highlighting their current isolation and absence of meaningful connection. These periods create emotional vulnerability that reduces their contact resistance. Their circumstantial triggers extend to stress periods, including work pressures, family conflicts, health issues, or major life changes that overwhelm their emotional regulation capacity while increasing their need for support and connection. They typically resist seeking. The trigger system includes social events like weddings, parties, or gatherings where they observe other couples and experience social pressure or awareness of their single status that intensifies their relationship loss recognition and contact motivation. Their timing triggers also involve achievement moments, including career successes, personal milestones, or life accomplishments where they experience desire to share positive experiences with their former partner, creating natural contact opportunities. The circumstantial factors include mutual friend interactions, shared social spaces, or professional connections that create natural contact justifications while providing face-saving explanations for reaching out that protect their ego and independence image. The digital age contact patterns. Modern technology has created new avoidant contact patterns that allow them to test reconnection waters while maintaining plausible deniability and emotional protection. These digital patterns reveal optimal moments for responding to their indirect contact attempts or initiating strategic contact. Their digital patterns begin with social media surveillance, where they monitor their former partner's online activity, relationship status, and life updates to assess availability and emotional state before considering direct contact attempts. The contact patterns include indirect engagement through social media likes, comments, or story views that test their former partner's receptiveness while maintaining emotional distance and deniability about serious reconnection intentions. Their digital strategies extend to mutual friend information gathering, where they seek updates about their former partner's life, relationship status, and emotional state through shared connections rather than direct inquiry or contact. The patterns also involve strategic posting, where they share content designed to communicate their current status, success, or availability to their former partner without direct communication that might reveal their emotional state or contact intentions. Their digital contact includes testing messages like holiday greetings, birthday wishes, or casual check-ins that provide low-risk opportunities to gauge their former partner's responsiveness and receptiveness to renewed communication. The response assessment and escalation framework. When avoidants do initiate contact, they carefully assess responses to determine whether to escalate communication or retreat back into protective silence. Understanding their assessment criteria reveals how to respond strategically to their contact attempts for maximum reconnection potential. Their response assessment begins with emotional temperature reading, where they analyze their former partner's communication tone, response timing, and emotional availability to determine whether conditions are favorable for increased contact and potential relationship discussions. The escalation framework includes reciprocal interest evaluation, where they gauge whether their former partner demonstrates genuine enthusiasm for renewed contact versus polite but distant responses that suggest emotional unavailability or relationship disinterest. Their assessment system extends to boundary testing, where they gradually increase contact frequency, emotional content, or personal disclosure to determine their former partner's comfort level and willingness to rebuild emotional connection. The framework also involves competition awareness, where they assess whether their former partner has developed new relationships, increased social activities, or demonstrated emotional growth that might threaten their chances for successful reconnection. Their escalation assessment includes vulnerability, tolerance testing, where they determine whether their former partner responds positively to emotional expression, future discussions, or intimacy attempts versus maintaining protective boundaries that prevent relationship rebuilding. The optimal response strategy framework. Understanding avoidant timing patterns provides strategic opportunities for responding to their contact attempts in ways that encourage genuine reconnection while avoiding the pursuit behaviors that trigger their defensive systems and contact withdrawal. The optimal response strategy begins with measured enthusiasm, where positive but not desperate responses demonstrate genuine interest while maintaining the emotional stability and independence that avoidants find attractive and non-threatening. Their response framework includes boundary maintenance, where appropriate limits on contact frequency, emotional intensity, and future planning prevent overwhelming their system while demonstrating the self-respect and emotional regulation they require for sustained engagement. The strategy extends to independence demonstration, where continued personal life satisfaction, social activities, and emotional stability show that you have thrived during separation rather than suffered, making you more attractive for reconnection attempts. Their optimal response includes authenticity without pursuit, where genuine emotional expression avoids the desperate or needy behaviors that trigger avoidant withdrawal while still communicating your openness to rebuild connection. The framework also involves patience and timing, respect where you allow their internal clock to guide contact escalation rather than pushing for faster relationship progression that might activate their defensive systems and contact termination. The long-term timing pattern recognition. Avoidants who maintain contact after initial reconnection continue operating according to predictable timing patterns that govern relationship escalation, emotional availability, and commitment progression. Understanding these patterns prevents misinterpretation of their communication cycles. The long-term patterns include consistency testing, where they maintain contact to assess whether their former partner's emotional stability and independence remain stable over time, rather than representing temporary behavior changes designed to regain their attention. Their timing recognition extends to stress response monitoring, where they observe how their former partner handles life pressures, relationship challenges, and emotional difficulties to determine whether a renewed relationship would create emotional burden or provide mutual support. The pattern analysis includes emotional investment graduality, where they slowly increase emotional sharing, future planning, and relationship discussions at their own pace, rather than responding to external pressure or partner expectations for faster progression. Their long-term timing involves defensive system monitoring, where they remain alert to their own anxiety levels and attachment activation to ensure relationship rebuilding doesn't threaten their psychological safety or autonomy protection needs. The pattern recognition includes integration assessment, where they evaluate whether renewed relationship fits with their broader life goals, social connections, and personal development, rather than creating conflict or limitation they cannot tolerate. The failed contact recovery strategies. When contact attempts fail to generate desired responses or trigger unexpected defensive reactions, avoidants implement recovery strategies that either preserve future contact opportunities or permanently terminate communication based on their assessment of relationship viability. Their recovery strategies begin with retreat and reassessment, where failed contact attempts result in strategic withdrawal that allows them to process rejection while preserving ego protection and future contact possibilities if circumstances change. The failed contact response includes blame attribution, where they determine whether contact failure resulted from poor timing, inadequate approach, or fundamental partner unavailability that affects their willingness to attempt future communication. Their recovery framework extends to alternative contact methods, where direct communication failure leads to indirect approaches through mutual friends, social media engagement, or environmental positioning that creates natural contact opportunities. The strategies also involve patience extension, where failed initial contact is interpreted as premature timing rather than permanent rejection, leading to extended waiting periods before subsequent contact attempts when conditions might be more favorable. Their recovery assessment includes relationship viability evaluation, where contact failure forces them to determine whether relationship rebuilding remains possible or whether permanent separation represents the most psychologically healthy choice for both parties. The professional and therapeutic intervention timing. Understanding avoidant timing patterns provides valuable information for therapeutic professionals and relationship counselors working with couples attempting to rebuild relationships after separation or no contact periods. Professional intervention timing begins with therapeutic readiness assessment, where avoidants demonstrate openness to relationship counseling or individual therapy when their contact attempts reveal genuine motivation for behavior change rather than temporary relationship restoration. The intervention framework includes couples therapy, optimal timing, where both partners have processed separation anxiety and developed individual emotional stability that creates favorable conditions for relationship repair work and communication skill development. Their therapeutic timing extends to individual attachment work, where avoidants show willingness to examine their defensive patterns and underlying emotional wounds when relationship loss has created sufficient motivation for personal growth and psychological healing. The intervention assessment includes crisis intervention timing, where relationship rebuilding attempts create emotional intensity that requires professional support to navigate successfully without triggering defensive withdrawal or relationship termination. Their professional support includes long-term therapy timing, where sustained relationship rebuilding requires ongoing therapeutic support to maintain behavioral changes and prevent reversion to previous defensive patterns during stress or conflict periods. The neurochemical cycles and biological timing. The avoidance internal clock operates through sophisticated neurochemical cycles that govern their attachment system activation and deactivation patterns. These biological rhythms create predictable windows of emotional availability and defensive vulnerability that determine optimal contact timing for maximum psychological impact and reconnection success. The neurochemical cycles begin with dopamine regulation patterns, where initial separation relief gradually gives way to reward system depression as they lose access to positive relationship experiences and emotional validation. This neurochemical shift creates internal motivation for reconnection that peaks at predictable intervals. Their biological timing includes cortisol and stress hormone fluctuation, where initial separation anxiety triggers elevated stress responses that gradually normalize over weeks, creating optimal contact windows when their nervous system has regulated sufficiently to receive emotional input without defensive activation. The cycles extend to oxytocin and bonding hormone depletion, where absence of physical affection and emotional intimacy creates biological craving for connection that intensifies over time, making them more receptive to contact attempts that might restore access to bonding experiences. Their neurochemical patterns also involve serotonin regulation challenges, where prolonged separation creates mood instability that makes contact and emotional support more appealing than their usual preference for independence and emotional self-regulation. The biological timing includes sleep cycle disruption and recovery patterns where separation anxiety interferes with rest quality before gradually improving, creating vulnerability windows when exhaustion reduces their defensive capabilities while increasing their emotional accessibility. The memory, processing, and emotional integration timeline. Avoidants require specific time periods for processing relationship memories and integrating emotional experiences before they can risk renewed contact without triggering overwhelming anxiety or defensive shutdown. This processing timeline creates optimal contact windows when their emotional integration reaches levels conducive to reconnection. The memory processing begins with selective amnesia, where they initially suppress positive relationship memories while emphasizing conflicts and incompatibilities that justify separation. This selective memory gradually breaks down as their emotional defenses weaken over time. Their integration timeline includes positive memory flooding, where suppressed experiences of happiness, satisfaction, and emotional connection resurface with intensity that cannot be dismissed or rationalized away, creating powerful motivation for relationship restoration. The processing extends to idealization development, where emotional distance allows them to remember their partner and relationship through increasingly positive filters that emphasize compatibility and minimize previous conflicts or relationship challenges. Their emotional integration also involves regret processing, where they begin acknowledging their own contributions to relationship problems while recognizing their partner's positive qualities and relationship efforts they previously minimized or dismissed. The timeline includes fear processing, where they work through their attachment anxieties and defensive reactions to determine whether renewed relationship represents acceptable emotional risk or continued threat to their psychological safety and autonomy. The social environment and external pressure dynamics. The avoidance contact timing is significantly influenced by social environmental factors and external pressures that either accelerate or delay their willingness to break no contact based on perceived social costs and benefits of reconnection attempts. Social environment factors begin with peer relationship observation, where witnessing friends, successful relationships, or relationship satisfaction creates awareness of what they might be missing through continued separation and emotional isolation patterns. Their environmental dynamics include family pressure and social expectations, where relatives or mutual friends express opinions about their relationship status that influence their comfort level with continued separation versus reconnection attempts. The social factors extend to professional and career considerations, where relationship status affects their social standing, networking opportunities, or professional image in ways that influence their motivation for relationship restoration. Their environmental assessment also involves community and cultural context evaluation, where social norms about relationships, independence, and emotional expression affect their perception of contact attempts as acceptable or embarrassing behaviors. The social dynamics include mutual friend group pressure, where shared social circles create awkwardness around their separation that might motivate reconnection attempts or provide natural opportunities for contact that preserve their dignity and independence image. The strategic deactivation and reactivation patterns. Avoidance employs sophisticated strategies for deactivating and reactivating their attachment systems based on their assessment of relationship safety and partner availability. Understanding these patterns reveals optimal timing for contact attempts that align with their reactivation cycles. The deactivation patterns begin with conscious emotional suppression, where they deliberately minimize relationship importance while engaging in activities and thought patterns designed to reduce attachment activation and emotional dependency recognition. Their reactivation process includes gradual emotional thawing, where defensive numbness slowly gives way to awareness of genuine feelings and attachment needs that have been suppressed through their separation coping strategies. The strategic patterns extend to testing phases where they experiment with emotional accessibility and vulnerability to assess whether their attachment system can tolerate increased activation without overwhelming anxiety or defensive shutdown. Their deactivation cycles also involve comparison and evaluation periods where they assess their single life satisfaction against relationship memories to determine whether reconnection represents improvement or threat to their current emotional stability. The reactivation patterns include readiness assessment, where they evaluate their psychological capacity for relationship stress, conflict navigation, and emotional intimacy before determining whether contact attempts represent manageable risk or dangerous vulnerability. The attachment security assessment process. Before initiating contact, avoidants engage in complex assessment processes to evaluate whether their former partner has developed secure attachment patterns that make reconnection safe versus anxious patterns that might recreate the relationship dynamics they found threatening. The security assessment begins with partner behavior analysis, where they monitor their former partner's post-separation activity, social media presence, and life choices to determine emotional stability and relationship readiness versus desperation or rebound behavior patterns. Their assessment process includes independence, evaluation, where they gauge whether their former partner has developed genuine self-sufficiency and emotional stability versus continued dependency on external validation that might create pressure for emotional availability they cannot provide. The security analysis extends to growth recognition, where they determine whether their former partner has addressed personal issues, developed relationship skills, or demonstrated emotional maturity that might make renewed relationship more successful than previous attempts. Their assessment also involves manipulation, resistance, evaluation, where they determine whether their former partner has developed appropriate boundaries and self-respect that would prevent return to previous dysfunctional patterns that characterize their relationship. The security assessment includes compatibility reevaluation, where they consider whether fundamental relationship issues have been resolved or whether renewed contact would simply recreate previous conflicts and incompatibilities that led to separation. The contact method, selection, and approach strategy. When avoidants decide to break no contact, they employ sophisticated strategies for selecting communication methods and crafting approaches that maximize positive response probability while minimizing vulnerability and potential embarrassment or rejection. The method selection begins with low-risk communication choices like text messaging, email, or social media contact that allows them to express interest while maintaining emotional distance and avoiding the vulnerability associated with voice or in-person communication. Their approach strategy includes message crafting that balances genuine interest expression with casual tone that provides emotional escape routes if their contact is not well received or creates uncomfortable vulnerability exposure. The selection process extends to timing optimization, where they choose specific days, times, and circumstances that maximize favorable reception while minimizing competition from their former partner's other activities or commitments. Their contact strategy also involves content calculation, where they determine appropriate emotional intensity, personal disclosure, and future reference levels that demonstrate genuine interest while avoiding overwhelming their former partner or triggering their own attachment anxiety. The method selection includes backup plan development, where they prepare alternative approaches and response strategies for various reception scenarios, ensuring they can maintain dignity and emotional protection regardless of contact outcomes. The reconnection, success factors, and relationship rebuilding. Successful avoidant contact attempts create opportunities for relationship rebuilding that require navigating complex dynamics between their attachment activation and defensive systems while establishing healthier patterns that address previous relationship problems. The success factors begin with mutual readiness, where both partners have processed separation experiences and developed individual emotional stability that creates favorable conditions for relationship rebuilding without recreating previous dysfunction. Their rebuilding process includes behavioral change demonstration, where avoidants show sustained capacity for emotional availability, communication improvement, and relationship investment that addresses previous problems while maintaining their psychological safety. The success framework extends to boundary negotiation, where both partners establish clear expectations about emotional availability, relationship progression, and commitment levels that honor both attachment needs and autonomy requirements. Their rebuilding also involves conflict resolution, skill development, where both partners learn to navigate disagreements and relationship stress without reverting to previous patterns of avoidant withdrawal or anxious pursuit that created relationship instability. The reconnection success includes ongoing growth commitment, where both partners remain engaged in individual development and relationship skill building that prevents return to defensive patterns while supporting continued emotional intimacy and connection development. Understanding the avoidance secret clock provides strategic opportunities for optimizing contact timing while recognizing the complex psychological processes that govern their willingness and capacity for reconnection. Success requires patience, strategic thinking, and emotional intelligence that respects their attachment patterns while maintaining appropriate boundaries and expectations for genuine relationship rebuilding rather than temporary reconnection, followed by repeated separation cycles.